Okay. Um, so yesterday, first of all, let me say this. Sometime today, after we get to the first break, that's when we're going to do the ordination. And still at this moment, I don't know how we're going to set it up in terms of getting it done. But Barbara figured out when we get to that point, probably. One of us will anyway. So Bob, you want to pick up from where we were yesterday in terms of the transformation and promise and stuff?
Well, maybe it'll be better to just basically summarize what we've done to get to this point. We started talking about 11-11-11 yesterday. The significance of the numbers, the significance of the date. And we broke it down in several different ways just to jumpstart us. We talked about 1 equals unity. 1 plus 1 is 2, that equals union, division, and witness. 2 plus 1 equals 3, which represents resurrection, divinity, completeness, and perfection. 3 plus 1, those are all of the combinations of adding those 6 ones together in a sense. 3 plus 1 is creation, and it can represent the world of mankind. 4 plus 1 is 5, God's grace and goodness. And then 5 plus 1 is 6, which can represent man's weaknesses, the evils of Satan, or the adverse thoughts within us, and the manifestation of sin. Then we looked at another combination, looking at 11, which can represent judgment and disorder. 11 plus 11 is 22, which can represent light. And then 22 plus 11, 33, promise. After a lot of discussion, and a lot of input from everyone, we centered around judgment and disorder. We centered around light and promise. And that, in a sense, began to give us some focus for continued discussion. And we talked about, I think, we started talking about time. I think Jamel brought up the issue of time and what time does for us. And we talked about what the purpose of time was for us and for mankind in general. And it was an opportunity for mankind to redeem himself. It brought, if for instance, if whatever we did before man was clothed in skin, whatever we thought became what became manifested, that could have been potentially very detrimental to mankind. Because if I thought I wanted to slap this gentleman right here, I mean, the time from my thought to my hand slap would be no time at all. But there are some consequences. There's some consequences to that too. And so being clothed in skin just brought us some time so that we could begin to have opportunity to create that space. The same thing, again, that happens in the beginning when God created everything. He created space. What we're doing is doing the same thing. Create space to think about what we're doing and not react and not have our reactions manifest immediately because there are consequences. Now there's a downside to that now too, because now when we don't, because we don't have necessarily an immediate manifestation of thoughts, the downside is that we think nothing is happening. It can be years before we reap the consequence and or the reward of our thoughts and our actions. And so, or it could be lifetimes if you think about it in that sense. So there's a potential other side of that as well. Anyway, back to what we were talking about. We were talking about this whole concept of time, and that in a sense, though, time kind of holds us hostage. No, I'm sorry. We hold, well, it's a little both. Time holds us hostage. We can hold time hostage too by hanging on to it. It keeps us bound, if you will. We allow time to order our day. we allow time to order our steps in a lot of instances. We have to be a certain place at a certain time. We take lunch at a certain time. We gotta go to this meeting at a certain time. We have to do this at a certain time. And then we got to go to PTA at a certain time. So really, time orders who we are.
You know, when you said that, something happened to me. When you talk about time ordering, what we have done then, in essence, we have made time our God, our Father. Jehovah has become our time, because the scripture clearly says that for our the steps of a righteous man are ordered by not Elohim but Jehovah. So whoever orders our steps become the one who we look to for our source, and that probably is the reason that we are more apt to be on time for work than we are to be in a place where we can grow spiritually. You see what I'm talking about? Because we see that as our source, as opposed to the source from which we all come anyway. And to add to what you said about the numbers, I don't want to get too far away from it before I point this out. When I asked Janice to send me the numbers, the telephone number for the hotel, so when she texted to me, she texted with a footnote. Something about this is weird, but what happened is the last 4 digits is 1111, the number to the hotel. So everything surrounding us.
The teachers at the table.
Yeah,
You
11.
counted that?
11 teachers at the table. So this whole idea of this interest into this gateway has in itself manifested in such a way that it is undeniable that our presence was purposed by the cosmos, you know, in terms of coming together yesterday. So what happened, I think, Jamil, when you point, this out about the teachers, the gateway yesterday was the 11, but now we become the gateway. You see, we become the gateway because we are now 11. You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what we do with this whole thing?
What a responsibility.
Oh my God, yes. What we do with this determines the direction of mankind. I don't think it's coincidental that it came to I know my attention, maybe some of the others, that those 3 deaths at the Occupy camps, in the last couple of days, one in Oakland, death in Salt Lake City, one in Vermont. Those 3 deaths, I think it came to our attention because it's our responsibility to make sure that this thing does not devolve into something it shouldn't be, neither should it evolve into something it should not be. So that balance has to be brought by those of us who have become the gate. And I don't think we, as we talked about yesterday, have to spell it out. We just have to have some idea of what, if we can do this today, it would be great. If we could begin speaking differently than we normally do, like yesterday when we were talking about what ifs or supposes.
And we really need to talk about that and make sure we address that, what we discussed yesterday.
Okay.
You might not have been finished.
I mean, just go ahead and write that down as so we don't forget it.
Oh, yeah.
Let me just
Go
finish
ahead,
with the
go ahead,
overview
go ahead,
then.
go ahead.
So again, we're looking at judgment, we're looking at light and promise. And time is one of those things that we looked at under the category of judgment. Another issue we talked about is money and the impact that money has on our lives. And so what we did was we translated judgment into the God of money. There's a God of time. for giving us the opportunity, for giving us the opportunity to resist the urge. Like if this guy here, you gotta do this. If this guy here says something to me that I don't like, I have to be thankful for the opportunity, for God for giving me the opportunity to resist the urge to smack him. which then strengthens me in terms of responding like my maker instead of being reactive. Does that make sense? Just react to that right quick. Respond to that right quick, please. I thought you'd be first.
You'd be first.
I'm about to
In
say,
defense of
I'm
yourself.
about to say, me and Jamil need to switch seats.
You see what you care about, you like to do.
So I think I just have a comment. So time is a space in between action and response, giving us the opportunity to respond instead of react. So now the time is speeding up, slowing down, coming full circle. We are being judged in the sense that we are meeting with the karma that is at the close of that circle. And you can't escape that, but you push through it, just like we were mentioning yesterday. And depending on what you do with that opportunity, the chaos and the opportunity, that determines the nature of the game you just walk through. What was I gonna say? I'll come back to it.
See, when you said that about time is the space between the action and the response to it. What dawned on me is that when we were talking about eliminating time, moving beyond time, if we continue to respond rather than to react, you remember yesterday we were referencing something that you said about reacting. If we begin to respond rather than to react, and it become second nature, that's just who we are, that's how we eliminate time. Because you don't have to create that space anymore. You know, for you to posture yourself for the response. You become the response rather than the reaction. You see where I'm coming from? So the more that this space shrinks, the more that we are able to move beyond this thing called time. I noticed something. I just showed this to Ron. When it comes to the fine tuning of man, it is not Elohim who does it. Neither is it Jehovah who does it. It is both of them. It says that in that second chapter, the Lord God formed man from the dust of the earth. It's Jehovah and Elohim formed man from the dust of the earth. When it talks about, in this third chapter, it talks about, it talks about, and unto Adam, also to his wife did the Lord God make coats of skin and clothe them. Jehovah and Elohim made the undergarments, because the word coats is undergarments of skin. If we talk about undergarments of skin, you hear me? What's the garment outside of the skin? Because when you look at the word coats, it says tunic or undergarment. So if the skin is the tunic of the undergarment, then what is the garment that covers the skin? That's what we call an aura. That's who we really are. So if that's the garment that covers the skin, then the only way that we can truly get to the place where we transcend time, we have to get to the place where we are more cognizant of the true body as opposed to the tunic that's beneath the true body.
I wanted to go into this, kind of give like a basic example of how we are in bondage to time, or time has us in bondage, because to relate it to, so that we can understand, is that if we say an event occurs when we're 8 years old, and that action occurs and we never respond to it the right way, then what occurs is, even we could become 30, 40 years old, that we are still at that place in time stuck. We're frozen at that place of pain. So even though our body grows through time, we are still at that experience, and we're interpreting our relationships, we're reacting to our relationships according to a time that we have been frozen in. So when we practice forgiveness through responding through that pain the right way, and forgiveness, one of the things I thought about the power of forgiveness is that it rises above time, which controls the material world, and it does that by transcending the way we perceive forgiving people. Because think about this, the powerful thing about forgiveness is when you give it and it's not deserved, according to your mind. I'm thinking about a child being hurt by an adult. They look innocent in this physical world. You say, oh, that child should have never been hurt. But when we respond spiritually and understand that that was negativity that we can free ourselves from, and the person who didn't know how to free themselves from it, even though it's not deserved to our mind, we release ourselves from being stuck in that place of time. We release ourselves from having to process everything in a reactive way because of the pain we felt. So we free ourselves from being stuck at different points when we give to people and events that don't deserve it according to how we think and feel.
But then that takes us back to even that 8-year-old child having chosen the parents and the obstacles that they face, even if it's abuse. That's a chosen journey, so that they can get beyond something. You see,
Yeah.
so if we can perceive it that way, then it doesn't mean we don't have compassion, because the only reason you observe it or become aware of it is because you have chosen a journey that will of compassion.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Penn State fraternal thing. I don't know a person under the cover who did not have a deep compassion for the children who are involved in that. But in all of our discussion, we have not talked about the compassion that we must have for the perpetrator.
I think we were talking about that last night.
Yeah, you see what we're talking about? So just like those, here we go, right? Those children chose to be in that situation. He chose to do it, and we have to choose to correct it.
Clarify just quickly what you mean by the children chose.
Oh, okay. Yeah. What we're talking about is that the journey that we embark on is a journey that we chose before we entered our mother's womb, and the forgetfulness of it came after we exited the womb, and the journey begins. And the reason we forget that is because we are not supposed to be privy to what's coming, because if we were, it wouldn't make any changes at all, because we would know how it's going to work out. But the obstacle has to be there without us knowing how to work out, so we will be put in a position to make choices. And when I say that he chose it, I don't mean that they say, well, I'm going to be abused tomorrow. It wasn't like that at all. This is something that was, I think Leonard brought it up, predestined, but not predestination in the sense that we have been taught about predestination.
I was thinking about that last night after we watched the film we watched. But my thought was, what makes it so hard to forgive people who do things like that? Obviously, you run a whole gamut of emotions when you see stuff like that, right? And I was also thinking about the Penn State situation. And I walked up to the room and I'm thinking, who can I send this tape to? That's powerful. Who would appreciate something like this? And only one person came to mind. And I'm like, out of all the people I know, the person who does who ends up being the predator, and even people today who I'm looking at, 'cause it shocked me that a young person will come up with something like that, because people now have a strong sense of entitlement. You know, I don't have to live back in those days. You got, okay, so you did this for me, thank you. Let's move on. They don't want to know. They feel entitled to having certain things and not appreciating how it came about. The same thing with the guy who abused the kids at Penn State. He felt entitled to do that. He didn't see them as human beings. He saw them as something that would bring him pleasure, and that's all he could see. And that's what makes it hard to forgive. That's what makes it hard to see the person.
And that is the reason it is more demanding for you to be able to forgive. See, to reach out to the perpetrator is a lot harder to reach out to the victim.
Yes.
And the more difficult the journey is, the stronger you become, or the sharper you become, or the more you become aware of who you are. So that's why it's encouraging to look at
You have to.
the perpetrator. You just want to start there.
Oh, well, you know, we were just, talking this morning at breakfast, and we were just talking about, in that situation, the crisis management, what's the best way for them to move on, and you kind of take it, lightheartedly, or that it's not as important, but sometimes you don't forgive, or it's hard to forgive because, you know what, you feel that person owes you an apology, and they may well owe you an apology, but, just like we discussed now, you still have to, put yourself in position to say, okay, I've got to move on, so I'm gonna forgive this person, whether they apologize or not. But we were just talking this morning, you're better off when you're wrong apologizing, and you can get beyond a situation quicker if you just say, you know what, instead of trying to cover up or to conceal what you did wrong or try to justify it, you're better off just apologizing straight up. I did this, I was wrong, take your punishment. And on the flip side, forgiveness comes a lot easier, because if somebody has done something to me and they come out and apologize, it's going to be harder for me not to forgive that person. So on the flip side, the situation where we're working with somebody helping to get through something, I think that's the first step of, okay, help this person apologize, and then you work through it with them together, moving forward. And the forgiveness. Okay.
My question is, I'm going through this at work. It's these two ladies, and this lady did something to her 30 years ago, and she's still carrying this grudge for 30 years now. But her husband was involved in it. She can forgive her husband, but she can't let go of this woman. And she said rude stuff to her. She, talks about her behind her back. And this lady, she said, that's not me. She talked to the supervisor. He told her, go out front and tell somebody about it. And she said, no, I've already talked to somebody about it. And she told me, she said, I've let it go. Why can't she? And you think about this, how people can carry a grudge for this long, and it's got to be eating her up inside to, for 30 years, let it go. I mean, is it helping you to carry?
It's easy for you to see that.
But why, why is it to the point that I can forgive, okay, say for instance, if Jamil was mad, and Kathy did the same thing to me.
Yeah.
I can forgive her, okay, your family, I'll forgive you, but I can't forgive him.
It's no different than somebody saying, I said, hey dog, what's up? We know each other, so it's fine. But if I call someone I don't know that, then they get angry. They chose to do that. And I got some stuff about their attitude, but I'm
gonna take it somewhere. I'm gonna take it somewhere, even to why we have a problem with dealing with the criminal or the rapist or the whoever did it. And even your question, the reason it's so difficult for her, and it is difficult for us to see based on the laws here, is because that person is the most truest mirror of herself.
That's it.
That's the thing. The husband, she doesn't, that's a more comfortable mirror of herself. Some part of her she's more familiar with. But when we see, take it back to the paternal thing, the raper, we can identify with the victim because we can more easily put ourselves in the place of being victims of the world, victim of our parents, victim of the job. You see what I'm saying? But the deeper mirror is how we are the manipulators of things. That's a harder thing for us to embrace, the manipulator that we are. You see, so that's why we can always identify with victims everywhere, the child or the wife that's abused, but why does nobody ever identify with the husband? Because it's a deeper mirror of how we, even if it's deep down, manipulate things behind the scenes or control things. And when we look at it more close, it takes us to a place of activated, we're afraid of our power to change it by looking at that part of the mirror. So that's why it takes longer when we have these issues that we hold so many years, because it's really a mirror of what we truly have deep down in that we have not dealt with.
That's what hate is. Hate is not a bad thing. When somebody hates you, that's tremendously great. Because hate, when someone hates you, it's because the reason they are hating you is so deeply embedded in who you are, till you can't see it yourself. So it takes shock therapy to make you see yourself in that mirror. And when you deal with that issue by returning affection for that, then you are diminishing that in you.
And I was also thinking that if she had forgave the woman, the mirror would stop working, or not stop working, but it would not be reflecting, why is this woman still mad at me, at the point that it does not matter to her. So she has corrected that thing within herself. But as long as she has not corrected that thing within herself, that's when she's going to keep asking the question, why is this woman doing this? Once it's corrected, it actually won't even be a problem.
Well, I mean, like, she's apologized to the woman.
And that's what I mean. But what I mean is, when it gets to the point where she's apologized to the woman, and the woman having a problem with her does not matter to her anymore, that at that point she has transcended the problem and she has corrected that problem which she is seeing in that mirror. The other thing is, as far as the implications, to be able to forgive someone, forgive the rapist, what that actually is doing is bringing you into a greater awareness of yourself, because it's easy to forgive something that you might see as like a small slight, but for you to forgive something that is very, very huge means that you have to be aware of yourself, that that person is a part of you, and that's a lot harder. So actually, to have something that's very paramount that you have to forgive, that's how that's bringing you into a greater awareness of yourself, because it is pushing you that much further outside of yourself, so to speak.
And when you look at the one who is carrying the grudge, that's the mirror she's familiar with. And the reason she doesn't turn it loose is because she doesn't know what it feels like to be without it. And I will guarantee you that the husband plays a role in that by allowing her to continue to be a victim. And as far as, the rapist, but the reason we need to deal with that is because all of us are rapists. Rape is a manifestation of a spiritual event. Why would God make reference to Israel as whores or adulterers? Why would that happen? Why was Dinah raped? It is reflective of the Shekinah being raped constantly. When we began to see the reflection of the Shekinah in everyone, then rape ends. But
I want to hit this. What is rape, and how? When you said how we are all rapists, I want to clarify that.
Okay.
I want to just say
go
this,
ahead.
that if you want to take it to us all being rapists, it simply means this: we force our thoughts on each other. We force our opinions of how other people should be and what we think they should be. That is how we are all rapists.
And that's the seed. It's the seed that we are forcing into someone that causes them to manifest what we are pushing off on them. That's rape. But we don't see it that way. We talked about once before the idea, the concept of spiritual rape. When you lie to a woman in order to get what you want, that's spiritual rape. If you don't mean what you're saying, that's spiritual rape. But now we have begun to see far beyond that. Constant rape is thought penetration against the will. And we see that more prevalently in religious settings, where you break down the victim and batter them. And one of the ways is that here you are, you're sitting in this place, and when someone says to you, you're sitting there and you're not into it, and they say, well, I wouldn't have a God, I could make some noise for it simply because you're not making noise. That's a form of rape, because they're pushing a thought in you. They're trying to penetrate you with a thought to change who you are. So I think what's happening here, and you correct me if I'm wrong, or help me out if you can. Either way, it doesn't matter, but don't sit there and look at me. When we are now beginning to take these things, the criminal things that we are seeing, and beginning to see the spiritual nature of them, not just the spiritual nature of them by virtue of an adversary, but the spiritual nature of them by virtue of what they actually are, what they really represent. You know, if I steal from Nick, it's because I have a perception of lack. You see, regardless of what I say. Now, the other thing is this. Why would I steal from Nick if I got $1 billion? I don't have a perception of lack, but I want to create lack in Nick.
But that goes back to what I was talking about. There's a difference between perception of lack and greed. You have $1 million, but you have 10,000 sheep, but you're gonna take my one sheep.
Yeah.
You see, so you feel entitled to have it. You don't see me as an individual. You don't even recognize that I'm on your level in any way. You feel like you're entitled. That's just plain greed.
That's Davidic attitude.
But that's not different from our perception of lack. That's an intensified perception of lack. When you feel like your perception of lack is so intense,
lack on steroids.
Yeah, then you try to get other people. You try to get others abundance for yourself.
Yeah, David.
So what is that when you have, like, if I've got my own, but you know what, I'd rather spend Kathy than I don't want to spend my own. I want to constantly see mine there, but I'll go ahead and take Kathy's.
And that's manipulative lack. you try to manipulate her to a place where she has lack. Why? Because you want to control her. Everything goes back to control, regardless of what it is.
And it takes it back to what Ron had talked to. No matter how much you have, it's that constant desire to hold on to what I have, and that goes back to when he talked. It's the fear of always not having. Even though I have an abundance, if I don't see it, then I perceive that I have lack. I know I have it, but am I one step away from tomorrow? It may all be gone. And if I'm thinking about it that way, like the Bernie Madoffs and people of the world, that I live this lavish lifestyle and I want what I want, even at the expense of everybody around me. I dupe them and take everything because I'm one step away from worrying and being afraid that one day I'll wake up and it's all gone. But while I'm talking, because I have to jump in fast, I want to go back to what ST and Sheldon said. ST said it's easier when someone comes to you and they're telling you, I messed up and I did wrong, and you can accept that. And yeah, we all would much rather have it that way. But then Sheldon was saying with the other woman, if I'm hearing you correctly, until she gets it settled, whether this woman ever comes to her or not, and says, I forgive you for what went on with my husband or whatever. There's a place where she's got to get to the point that no matter what, I've forgiven myself for what I did, number one, and now I embrace you and I know what I did was wrong. And even if she has apologized or whether she has never apologized, because I think of various scenarios in my life where someone has done something to me and another person came and told me. That person didn't know that I knew, and they said, don't tell them that you know. And it was something pretty devastating that you could either hold on to and let it eat away at you, or you could say, okay, I'm seeing this whole thing as spiritual release.
And I
Because
was,
you just have to say, it is what it is, I can't change, because what we've been saying, everything that happens in this journey brings us to a higher self, a higher awareness of self, that even if she was with somebody else's husband, and that woman cannot let go of that, she's got to get to a point where she recognizes, I see who I was at that point, I'm not that person anymore. I've forgiven myself, and now I've got to release her, that no matter what she says about me, against me, to others about me, I've got to let that go. And if she comes to me tomorrow, excuse me, and needs something, I've got to treat her like she's never been an enemy, because technically she's not an enemy.
and I'm.
But she is an enemy. Because
her
she
own
needs,
mind.
no, yours too. Because when we look at what an enemy is, an enemy is someone who needs something from you.
And
You
because
see,
of that, what I was actually thinking, she's only actually forgiving her to a point, because I was thinking before you said that, that lady who cannot get over it, she probably needs that other lady, for it not to matter to her, to help her.
That's what I'm gonna go back to, because I don't think we heard you when you said
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
That's powerful, because
Yeah.
it's exactly what
Because
it's got to get to.
what she's doing is she's actually redeeming her. All of it is just redemption.
Whether she knows it or not, she needs, it goes back to what Jamil was saying about the 30-year thing. Somebody's bugged you 30 years ago. You get to a place of forgiveness, whether they know it or not.
So-
it releases you. It
So that's
releases
where we
you as
go.
well.
You have to get her to the place where it doesn't matter. So the lady can, be released. And that's probably why it was brought, so that it could be dealt with and she's being released. I want to speak to this thing of fear. When you read Paul's letter to Timothy, he talks about Elohim is not giving us a spirit of fear. That means that fear has not been built into our nature. So if fear was not built into our nature, where did it come from? We created it. You see? If you believe that you are Elohim, right? What is there to fear? Because everything that is, you created.
But that's the essence. We don't really believe that. That's why we can hold on to stuff. It's only when we get to that point where we not only believe that, but act like we believe
Right.
that.
Now-
But you can't just believe. A belief, unless there's action.
There is no belief.
Yeah, to commit you, it's nothing.
See, when we go back to that second chapter again, log off on man from dust, that was molding the personality, the nature. It says, Jehovah and Elohim formed the man from the dust of the earth. Jehovah and Elohim formed man's nature from thought energy, earthly thought energy. So once the nature is formed, then you can combine the thoughts in any way you choose. That's free will. And by accommodating the thoughts in such a manner that diminishes us from Elohim, then it causes the psalmist to write, what is man that thou art mindful of him? God, you made him little lower than angels. That's not what it says. He diminished himself lower than Elohim. Why? Because he chose to take that nature that was created and mold it into what he wanted. This is the thing that's more telling to me, is that there were things that Elohim was permitted to do in terms of the scheme of things in creation. But when it got to the man and molding him, Father steps in. Jehovah steps. If you read that whole chapter, that first chapter, it talks about Elohim, Elohim, Elohim. When you get to the next chapter, around verse 2 or 3, it starts talking about Jehovah Elohim, all the way through that. You see what I'm talking about? So there was a connection there that says, okay, son, Jamil, you can go this far. But when we get to this point, we're going to have to do this thing together. Why? Because there has to be a tremendous infusion or a huge fingerprint of the Father in the process, so that there will be a direction to travel to come back to balance, as opposed to Elohim doing it alone. Why? Because if Elohim does it alone, then there was no mirror for him. Because the mirror for Elohim is Jehovah. And that's why it constantly goes to Lord God. Yeah, am I making sense? And the reason I see it that way is because I see Jehovah as being, and it is that, father, mother. Because when we look back at that, when we look at a womb, it's father, mother, isn't it? When we look at Elohim, it's plural, but it's not indicative of father, mother, but it's plural, talking about unity. But when we look at Yahweh, we look at the nameless one, we see a combination of both masculine and feminine energy. When the man is made, we see a combination of masculine and feminine energy, which was indicative of Yahweh also being, I'm not Yahweh, I'm sorry, Elohim also being that, because that's the image in which the man was made, right? Yeah. So, having said that, then, in order for us to have this thing that's called fear, we have to culminate, or we have to disbelieve, rather, the nature that we are. We cannot possibly possess or act on fear unless we don't believe who we are. So how do we, I suppose, get to the point where we are able to not just say it. We're not able to not just say it and act on it every once in a while, but it becomes a constant in the way that we live, the way that we talk. And because when I earlier was talking about the way we talk, rather than, we sit around the table and we're talking about the what ifs, the suppositions, and I'm bad about giving supposition, boy. Instead of doing that, we have to begin stating emphatically what we desire. And not being afraid to be challenged. If you state what you desire, and we cannot be afraid to challenge that to the extent that, are you sure this is a desire that we should be manifesting?
The other thing that we can do too is just like we tell ourselves, we in the past have told ourselves, you can't do this, that's really not for you. We need to be positive, and sometimes when we're by ourselves, we have to talk to ourselves and say, there's nothing for me to be afraid of here. Look at who I am, and I am Elohim also. There is no fear there. So, and we have to do that until we believe it. We have. It doesn't just come by osmosis. Just like going to a gym. You have to build that strength, and the only way we do it is by resisting those urges to react, stepping back, and allowing the situation to be transformed so that light comes in. So what we've been talking about, all of these things here, are the judgment aspect of this gate. 11, 11, 11 it's just a gate. It's an opportunity. And some of us are going to choose that gate of judgment and continue disorder. And I don't mean necessarily just us, I mean mankind. And some of us are going to choose to respond the way that we need to and know in our hearts, because that's who we are. And every time we choose not to be the victim, I went ahead and added that up here as one of those things that we've got to say death to victimization. Because death to victimization means that when we take responsibility for who we are, for our thoughts, for our actions, and our speech. And when we take responsibility, that's being like our Creator. Creator does not give excuses.
Well, for what he said earlier, I'm not even sure if he realized, but since we were walking into it and we put it all on the table, when you said we are the gateway, what you were actually saying, I don't know if you realize it or not, but you saying that you are the way and the light, and that's the new way and the light is for the transition to the new era, to do greater things. That's what you said.
Yeah, the funny thing about that is that I have not, recently been apprehensive about saying that I am the way, the truth, and the life.
Okay.
I'm not apprehensive. At one time I was apprehensive.
But why are we the way, the truth, and the life?
Because of who we are.
There you go.
Because of who, you see, the guy who did the act in the shower at Penn State is Elohim. He diminished himself. The reason you can do that is because you think that you're beneath what you were supposed to be. That's the only way you can do that and think it's okay. You see,
And that came from rape. Because I
That-
thought about
right.
something we talked about.
That's right.
We talked about how in marriages, a lot of women don't feel as though they are allowed to be themselves. That's because some societal concept has flowed down through churches, down through marriages to make them feel that way. And I thought about this. I thought about how it flows down. It's so interconnected that a husband does that only because he perceives lack. He feels that the only way he could feel like something is to make someone else subject to him, and it goes back and forth. So I see this weekend as an opportunity for all of us to give ourselves permission not to be imprisoned by those guidelines anymore. You see, because you have to individually give yourself permission to no longer honor that. And when you do that, you free yourself, even when you're in places. Give you an example, like when you're in a group of people and they get the negative vibe. Because I always say that someone will complain about the heat of one day, everybody will complain. You give yourself permission not to feed that. Not to tell them, no, y'all, I'm the creator, or no, I believe in Jesus, y'all. No, give yourself permission not to feed that yourself. That's the power that is the power that we are assuming right now, not to have to honor the shackles that we have allowed to be on ourselves, about doubting ourselves or following things that have been here before we were.
But I think to continue along what Bob was saying, also, in order for us to truthfully talk to ourselves about who we are, we have to get beyond seeing someone else as not being who we are. You know, when you look at a mass murderer, and you look at somebody who takes a baseball bat and brutally kills a whole family, and you've got to look at that person and know that that person's Elohim also, as opposed to the devil.
Oh.
You see? Or more, bring it home even more so. Your 15-year-old daughter gets raped and murdered. But you have to see that person who did it in the same light that you see yourself. That is very, very difficult, but it's also very, very necessary.
Think about what we said when we were talking about the incident where the guy killed the Mormon children, and the response of that family was forgiveness.
Oh, that,
immediate
oh, that's
forgiveness.
the Quakers.
I'm sorry, the Quakers.
Amish,
Yes,
Amish,
thank you.
yeah.
But it was immediate forgiveness. And think about the amount of life that came about
Yes.
because of that transformation of that individual and what that thought could have been versus what it actually was. What that action could have been, thank you, versus what it actually was. So,
But think about it also, look at what they did. They said that they did not want anyone to even think about it anymore. So they burned the building and built another school in a different location so that there would be no reminders of it. So that in itself is a manifestation of what forgiveness is in terms of restoration. And once something is restored, it is no longer what it once was. So when we do truly forgive, it may take some time for you to really get beyond. It's like some of the things that I've gone through or have been carried through in ministry, moving away from the box of the traditional stuff. There have been some God-awful things done towards me, and the people who did them, I know them. And my kids and some of the people who are close to me would say to me, how do you deal with them? Do you know what they did to you? They had no regard for you. And I'm like, I had to go back and think about what did they do? You know, because it doesn't, now that didn't happen with me overnight, but it took place. It happened, it didn't happen overnight, but it did happen overnight. And what I mean by that is this. It happened when I took I think it's the 137th song, and translated the whole song, and delivered the message from it, you know, in I think it's like 6 or 7 weeks. During that transition period, that's when all of the purification from those actions took place. And I saw it as purification from the action at the Mount Calvary Church. But what it ended up being was a purification from all of the action that had taken place most of my life. And on into the things that had not yet taken place. So when they did after that, it didn't matter. It at that moment, it did, but in an instant, it doesn't matter. So that you know, that's when the building was burned, that's what was happening. No history of it. It's supposed to be left there. They hit the clear history button.
I'm gonna take it somewhere else with that and build onto it a bit. And take my time like this with this. So if we are the creator and we created fear and separation and all of this, then this changes the whole paradigm, because it says that we came into this earth to experience what we created in order to transform it.
Yes.
So, and we saw the 7 scene mirrors. Did y'all see that? Yeah. One of the most powerful things it said in that video, it said, there was a video that I sent it to you too. There was a portion of it that said, what if even the parents you chose and that you lived with and they guided you, what if they, and what you think about them, and the things how they caused you to feel was the mirror you chose for yourself, for what you need to change? Do you see what I'm saying?
And it's true.
So I'm saying that it takes away blaming our parents or where we came up at, because what if it's saying that before we came here, just like Jeremiah says, before whatever, you know, I knew you, before you were born, I knew you.
Got the word there.
Yeah. So I'm saying, now that's what he was saying in the video. But when I saw it, I said this is the case, because I thought about everything I thought about growing up, and they became the positives of me, and they also became the issues that I'm still working out. And I said, I put those things before time into existence. Those were part of things that I generated, that I've come back here now to see the best mirror that I couldn't, because I can escape y'all, because I don't see y'all every day, but I can't escape the experiences I had day in and day out, the good and the bad. So when we are talking about this, we no longer can fuel things like, oh, that relationship hurt me so bad. That is a mirror for things we need to remove out of the earth by dealing with them. So we can't say, my parents, they didn't do this for me. That's something that we need to respond to correctly to change in the earth. So it changes everything from the blame to us being proactive in dealing with everything from a spiritual perspective. And we have to chew on that, because I'm saying this, but it's not no magical thing, and it takes lifetime to deal with it.
It's no coincidence, though, the root word for son means to build upon. You know, so you do see the thing when your parents are close, and it's an intimate relationship, but what do you do with it?
But you put them there. The things that you say you see those things, but you're responsible for them being there. You chose those thoughts.
And that's what I mean.
You know,
For
in
a
those
reason,
parents.
it was time to move forward with it.
My birth, you know, being out of wedlock, that thing, that used to bother me to the point where I became downright indignant with some people when they would say things to me, and I don't want to record some of the things I said. But those of you who know me can imagine. But when you think about, I chose that. Because if I had been born any other way, I could not travel the journey that I traveled. And to show you how wild this whole thing is, I was pushed heavily to go to Temple University. I didn't want to go to Temple University. I could run track at Temple. I didn't want to go there. But I was pushed to go there, and lo and behold, that's where my biological father lived in Philadelphia, you know? And everything was centered around Temple. And I didn't know that, but that energy was drawing me, you see? Now, had I gone, the journey would definitely be different. Do I believe that I should have gone? No, I don't. Because with the journey being different, we wouldn't be at this table. In saying that, I don't believe anyone at this table was haphazardly called, they were chosen. And everything that's happened in our lives, whether you call it good, bad, or ugly, was chosen by us because, you know, you always talk about us being minded priests, you know, developing the calendar and that kind of thing. Regardless of how we did it, we chose what we chose, the parents we chose, and the journeys we chose for today, to lead us to this place today. You see, and the Creator was so what? He was so
Compassionate.
not compassionate, adamant. He was so adamant about it being done right until Tiff couldn't get it. You see what I'm talking about? 11. Everything is like that. How do we get to the point where we can more easily wrap our mind around?
I'm gonna say something more easy too. Because I'm taking this to anybody can understand this from my experience in the past 4 months. Reading all the books I've read since I was 18, in the past 4 months, all I've been led to do is address the issues with the people I love the deepest. That's it. All I've been led to do is say, you know what? When I'm around so-and-so who's very close to me, right? Mother, father, there's still that little thing. Do y'all know what I'm talking about? Sometimes it can be with your parents or a brother or sister, and there's that funny thing that never nobody talked about. Just beneath the surface. And you kind of just always don't deal with it.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? For 4 months, the spirit that I am led me to address them each time. And each time I did not know how it would happen. I did not know what I would say because it was very awkward. Because I've realized we are not used to just addressing things. Bills, money, what food we like, we address that stuff quick. But how we make each other feel, it's difficult. But every time I went with the intention of bringing love to change the situation, I realized that the person was just as willing as me. Not going to combat them, say, you did this to me, or I did this to you, you need to just let it go. But saying, I want this to change. I really want this to change, and I want us to both be free. Maybe we won't both get free, but I want you to at least address it. And in addressing it over a 4-month period, I realized every time when you come with a pure motive for it to change, there's release every time, and it changes, and it opens up things in you that you never knew. And I'm talking about confidence in yourself that you didn't have because it was filled with issues that you always pushed down. And so the simplest thing I've learned the past 4 months is to address issues that we kind of just don't touch or seem awkward. And as you address them, it makes you lighter. It's almost like gravity can't hold you down as much as it used to.
Push it down.
Or push you over.
Yeah.
What I hear Jamil saying, and it goes back to what we talked about last night, about being honest with people, not out of vengeance or malice or anything like that, but just being honest, factually honest, so that you can deal with issues, so you can be responsible for your own thoughts, your own speech, your own actions. And I think the whole culmination of what I'm hearing is we all are in a place, we all have come through a journey so that we can recognize ourselves as Elohim, and we can, in effect, see Elohim in everybody else.
So that's coming out of the womb of Bereshit beginning. We are coming, the tunnel that you're coming out of, until we recognize we are Elohim, we are still in the birth canal. We have not exited the birth canal of beginning. And the thing about that is, or seemingly the confusing thing is that you don't exit the birth canal until you come to grip with who you are. But at the moment you come to grip with who you are beginning. You know, you become that birth canal. The moment that you exit the beginning, you become beginning, and you don't exit it until you recognize your Elohim. That's why Jesus said what he did to Nicodemus about entering the womb.
You know, it's like a, it's like a, sort of trust, you trust your instincts better. And it's easier around here, it's, you know, just use you as an example. I mean, as long as I've known you, the thing that you know we have to do, or we look at with everybody else that's involved with us, that because of the way you dealt with issues or the way you communicated through good and bad deals, you know, the level of trust is always there. We go to another setting, you're the outsider, you don't have that same level of trust. So even here, you know, between all of us, there's a commonality that, you know, that we all know. So when you have that, and I don't know how we actually, you know, spread that, but when you have that, it makes it a lot easier to say, okay, you can sit and have this discussion because the level of trust is there. And more so when things aren't going as well, or you're trying to get something accomplished together, it's easy to do it because that level of trust is there, and dependability and all these other things we talk about, you know, not being a victim, or I won't let you be a victim. You know, you take the right approach with everybody. If Kathy's telling me something, I'm genuinely listening. And even if there's a slight disagreement, we can still have a conversation about it, because that, you know, my gut tells me that, hey, you know, we're talking about the right thing, that instinct is there. And so I don't know how you can spread that.
But, go ahead, Nick.
The way you spread that is by going into a place and meeting that. And you will always encounter more resistance when you are initiating a group of people into that same type of field, energy field. But you will become the one that they want to have commonality with if they recognize that you are there genuinely to be a positive influence.
That's what Jesus was talking about. When he said, if you have confidence like I have confidence, then not only do you say that I've done, what he's saying is that confidence in what? Confidence in who you are. Confidence in where you came from. Confidence in what you were made to be. The reason we find it difficult, or think it's difficult, to initiate people into that is because of the miseducation. You know, what Carl G. Woodson wrote a book, The Miseducation of the Negro. You know, you could easily term that the miseducation of Elohim, because that's what has transpired. So when Jesus did that, what is he saying? When he says that the confidence, when you trust who you are, what happens? Other people begin to trust who you are. And when you help them to see who they are, then they become that. Yeah, it's the environment that we change by our presence. And you sometimes when we're in those environments, we talk the loudest by being quiet. And sometimes we talk the least by talking. We need to know when to deal with the issue. It's like we're sitting in this room and we're talking about we are Elohim, and if this were played out in another setting, we would be tarred and feathered. Heresy that would be the attitude. Now, we have to change what I just said by not saying it. We can no longer assume that this will happen. Because every time we make an assumption that this will happen, we have created the environment for it to happen. So from this point, we began to see everyone as us, as opposed to others as accused of a heresy. What happened is, in post-Constantine Christianity, the powers that be, and when I talk about the powers that be, I'm speaking of those who know how to manipulate energy fields, began to miseducate everyone concerning what the scriptures or the Holy Book is saying, regardless of where it came from. they began to miseducate everyone concerning that. Why? Because the miseducation separates us not only from those who are what we call saved and unsaved, but it also separates us from ourselves. And that's where the greatest confusion comes, when we are separated from ourselves, because once we're separated from ourselves, the fragments that we become the pieces to the wall that separates lower self from higher self. It becomes the covering of the mirror. You know, when he talked about the tearing of the curtain in the temple, the hanging, being torn so that life can come, but it's also the tearing of the membrane that separates us from who we are in terms of our thoughts, in our actions. So when we look at other people and say, as I said earlier, they were trying to feather us, that's a them and us statement. And it can never be a them and us statement, ever. Why? Because Jesus never dealt with it that way, the them and us. When he did not deal with the priests, it was them not wanting to deal with him. You see, when Nicodemus came to him, he didn't reject him. He dealt with him the same way he did everyone else. So, and that's why we have to get to that place and not be afraid or not be apprehensive about saying what we see, but saying it in a manner that is not provocative or demeaning. Well, the Mary Magdalene thing. You know, we have to be able to talk about the wife of Jesus and the idea that he would not be who he was had it not been for her, and vice versa, without destroying people, but do it because if it's necessary to be said, then the Elohim was said, and Sheldon won't. You see, when Sheldon says it, or when James says it, it hurts, or it causes perceived chaos. But when Elohim says it, not only does it bring order out of perceived chaos, but it also resonates and institutes a hunger in the recipients for more. Where did you get that from? That kind of thing. That's why the powers that be shut it down immediately, because they don't want people thinking beyond what they've already been taught. So there's never civil discussion about it at all. I mean, even when we talk about the creation thing, there's never civil discussion about that. Ever. It's all about the man and woman thing as opposed to us just being one. I mean, look at the plurality of Elohim. You can't change that. If Elohim represents the plurality, then that's what we represent. So this is the thing, I think, and help me with this. This is the thing. It is impossible for Barbara to be Elohim and nobody else. Because by virtue of saying the word, you are speaking of multiple gods. And I know what I just said. I do realize that. What I just said. We are talking about multiple elements. And in saying that, it's not blasphemous. But I tell you what is blasphemous. The Trinity. That's the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. That's totally blasphemous. Why? Because it separates something that's united. It takes the provider and separates the provider from the one who needs the provision. Because it says the Father, the Son, and the Holy. You see what I'm talking about? So with that, there was tremendous division, and guess how it's reinforced? It's reinforced through the basic things that every one of us have been taught. communion and baptism. Those things are reinforced. So subliminally so, we are being constantly reminded that we are detached individually as well as collectively. So we have to have a paradigm shift when it comes to understanding the concept of communion and the concept of baptism. And when that takes place, guess what happened? Resurrection. Because we begin to vibrate. We begin to vibrate at the same frequency. Not the same way, but at the same frequency. And that's what actual resurrection is.
Well, there's no indication of femininity in the Trinity either. I know the Holy Ghost is there and we understand that, but we're taught that it's three men. There's no family, there's no woman, it's just
Yeah.
three men running the show.
Homosexuality.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's homosexuality.
Mhm.
Because what happens is there's no womb for anything to be birthed. So well, that when you look at the early writings, you will see that the scriptures were gender neutral, and there was no need to put gender because the spelling of the words were indicative of whether or not it was feminine or masculine. And when the charismatic has taken the word Shekinah and made it glory, when that's not what it is. So if you take Shekinah and make it glory, what have you done? You've raped it. And you reduced it to nothing. Powerless. But if you see the Shekinah as the feminine energy, right, of the Creator, and you see Father, now, if there's Father, and there's feminine, there's Son. And all of them are one. Does that make sense? So there has to be a shift, a dramatic shift, not only in the way we talk to ourselves, but in the way we approach these things when we're talking to, answering questions for other people. Because it's a dire need for us to do that, and I think the foundational things are what we need to start understanding.
The other part of that is that if we are created in the image of Elohim, and Elohim, whatever those attributes are the same within us, and we've got to integrate and combine those same energies in ourselves to be effective as the Elohim. That's why Kathy introduced last night the issue of, I'm competent, and when I went and I thought about it, Kathy, that's how it translated for you, but it translates the same for every single one of us, maybe in not just that specific way. I'm competent in what I do, I know my job, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. People trust that I will give them what they need, the solution to their problems. But when it comes to some things in my personal life, do I trust it as much? And I thought about that, and I have to incorporate that with me. The same thing rings true for me, that we as teachers have to trust that whatever it is for us, it may be different, but whatever it is for us, we have to just trust that as well in our personal lives. Otherwise, yeah, but we got to trust it when we're out there by ourselves and talk to ourselves that this is who I am. Because if we call ourselves anything apart from Elohim, if we say we're poor, we say we have lack. If we say I'm not going to be anything, well, we can't call ourselves anything apart. Are we blaspheming ourselves when we call ourselves anything apart from who we are?
Because we deny the power.
And I want to say something too, because I realized something. What the things we're proficient in, the things we're proficient in, they don't have a lot to do with who we are so much deep down spiritually. They're things that we have a propensity for.
You just went beyond the entrance to the gate.
But what I want to share is this. What I realize is this. It's how we feel personally. That's what we project on what we believe in the Creator. You see?
Yeah.
Like, look at this. We can be in here for 10 years, but deep down, personally have an issue, and deep down, when we really depend on something beyond what man can do, if we don't deal with that issue, that's how we'll perceive the Creator. If we're hurt, we feel that we can't trust the Creator. You see? So it's the trust, it's the practice of trust that begins to repair. Because we talked about, I know me, the issue, and maybe it's everybody, the issue personally is that that's the most sensitive place. And that's the place you don't want to feel rejection or failure. That's the place you can't accept it. So it's those are the places where we really have to apply trust and self-acceptance, accepting who we are.
I remember teaching a few years ago, I just remember whether it was here at the old place, when we talk about what's deep inside, that is reflective of how you trust the Creator. I remember talking about how difficult it was for me to trust God. It was very difficult for me. I could say it, but when the rubber meets the road and my back was in the corner, it was very, very difficult. And it dawned on me one day that I was watching Malika more specifically, and a lot of times Keisha, and dealing with people and issues, they were speaking things that never happened, and they were in high school. You know, and got to the point where Malika became afraid because it was happening so quickly. And her whole personality changed when she backed away from it. Now, how is it that they could trust more so than I, and I'm the preacher? You know the reason? The reason is because they saw their daddy following through on what he promised. So they related to the father the way they related to their daddy. I didn't have a daddy to relate to. So I'm a Melchizedek. I came without that. So it was difficult for me because I did not have that. I had uncles who were great, but they were not the daddy. So I did not have that image before me. So it was more difficult for me to do, but I think it was necessary for me to do. In that, what you said earlier, Bob, we have no excuses. I had to deal with that. Me standing there before people all of the time, teaching this stuff and struggling with it myself. So I had to step away from. Tell them no. I don't know who that is.
That's Don. Sounds like Don.
Don, no.
I think he was talking to him, but I think he was just talking.
Okay. Listen, what I'm saying is that I had no, when that word listen, that fell out my mouth. I don't know where it came from. It must have came out your head. I had to forgive me for putting myself in a position not to trust. I also had to forgive my mama, my daddy. I had to get beyond blaming in order for me to get to a place where I could trust. And the bigger part of that is this. The very children who are my seed are the ones who taught me the necessity and the method of trust.
I'm gonna share something real quick. I just had a flash that just hit me because I link my experience. My dad was around, but he wasn't there like that. I didn't live with him. But I think about all the kids growing up without their fathers.
Yeah.
And I just thought about something. What if it is the generation that in ancient time chose to become their own gods and broke from the Father, who are coming into this earth to correct that?
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
What if we are coming here, we chose to become our own gods before, and now we are here now, to learn how to become dependent again by going through those insecurities, going through that place where we completely have struggling with things so that we can reconnect. I can see it.
That in itself would connect, I know us, in terms of the rejection issues. Because regardless of how we shape it or how we articulate it, it always goes back to a feeling of rejection. And when you think about the rejection issue, then all you have to do is go back to Jesus. He experienced rejection from everybody. And right now, and I'm not gonna lie to you, I still deal with that. I struggle with it because there are people who, in this room, there's no one in this room who I believe would not do anything in the world that I needed, on a moment's notice. I don't believe that. I don't believe anybody in this room would not talk to me because they're upset with me. I think everybody has a strong enough personality to let me know. Now, having said that, I go through periods where I wonder, do they really care? And that has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with the insecurity that I'm working with. But I have come to believe this, that insecurity is necessary. And the necessity of it is to keep me grounded. That's the thorn. Regardless of where I go or how lofty I am in terms of revelation, there has to be something to let me know you got to come down from the mountaintop.
That hit me back to Kathy. Sometimes I just thought about, if we don't have the breath knocked out of us, we won't come back down with the people who need us.
You're right, because think about it this way. We could sit here and do this all day. But what good is it going to do if we don't go beyond doing this all day? Because like last night, I believe the reservation was made last night because the Father knew that we were idiots and we would be sitting here at this table until this morning because somebody brought the food in. But having left, how much energy did we bring to that place? What kind of aura did we leave there because of our presence? And not only that, because of our discussion, the interaction that we had. So that's, and guess what we did, but I have my breath knocked out of it.
Back up for
Ain't no reversing this car.
I tried to get there when y'all was in Miami. You were in Chicago now. We talked about what you create before you're born. And you talked about the fathers. Now, if that is the case, if you want to take that a little further, that means that maybe we created this thing called the Trinity as well. We did to protect the Shekinah. You see what I mean? Because
Explain that a little bit.
if man recognized before now his spirituality, what would he have done to himself and to the earth? You see what I mean?
But
so he wasn't able to put it all together. He was only able to have intercourse with himself, or homosexuality, which brings about no life. So, but if he's not able to damage the spirituality of the Shekinah, not to the point where it can't be recovered.
But he couldn't do that anyway. See, what I'm saying?
It's been hidden from him though.
Yeah, and what happened, it wasn't hidden because he would have damaged himself, because man had an opportunity at Mount Sinai for redemption.
There have been cases throughout history.
Right, that he had for redemption. Yes.
And he passed on.
The Azusa Street movement was an opportunity for redemption, and he packaged it.
This is another.
Now, but what I'm saying is that the reason it was hidden is because the search was not genuine. The search was selfish. That's why it was hidden. The Shekinah, there were attempts to damage the Shekinah by post-Constantine Christianity by celibacy, by disrespect and disregard for the personage of females. Those were efforts to damage or to hide in a deeper place the Shekinah, because the energy in the earth, if you can control the energy in the earth, and they were doing it and are doing it, if you can control that, then you are in control of everything. We were talking about yesterday the money system. All of it is predicated upon who controls the flows of energy. You see, a definite manifestation or representation of that. You know what it is? Petroleum. Whoever controls the oil controls the money. So the oil is not about the cost. It's not about Saudi Arabia. It's about energy flow. And
I do too understand what Ron is saying, and I'll tell you, somebody who hit me up to this, my barber is in the Nation of Islam, and they have this thing where they say that the creator knew everything, was all wise and everything, but the only thing it did not have a chance to do, though it was aware of darkness, it had not experienced it. And so they said what the creator did was this time period, they said a 6,000 year time period, but it makes sense to me in this, and I'm just going to share it. They say that they wanted to create a form of themselves in the form of man to go through a period where they would forget where they came from and to experience darkness.
that's the goal.
And then, huh?
That's the goal. Is that the goal?
No.
Okay.
It's something else.
Okay.
They said that they allowed us to come into existence. We allowed ourselves to come into existence to experience darkness in order to absorb it, master it, and then choose to go back. What story does that sound like? The prodigal son. That's the same thing. What's happening? The prodigal son had everything there. But how did we feel if we were the richest man on the planet by ourselves? You would want to share. You would want to experience it with someone. So the prodigal son wants to go experience something different so that it can come back and recognize and embrace what it had before. Y'all see what I'm saying? So it kind of made sense because they talk about a kind of self-veiling, just like when we're born. We talked about yesterday how it's all in us, in our genes, our memory of our ancestors. But when we're born, we have no memory. And the whole prize of life is to go through, have different experiences so that we can come back into that memory and have an even greater one than before we left our mother's womb. So I see what you're saying in that we, in our darkness, and linking this with what you're saying, in our darkness, we created things so that we would have a protective layer from destroying things, but also we would have an opportunity to make discoveries. You see?
And it's there for man to open.
Right.
It's always been
So-
there. Just like you talk about history, it's always been there. We just have never been ready for it.
Right.
So you're saying that even with post-Constantine Christianity, it was necessary in order for us to get to the place where we are.
Had to be.
Okay.
If we buying into this, well, not buying into, but if we're saying what we're saying about who man is before he's even born, he's even created, then all of this is orchestrated for a reason, for a cause,
Let's talk about that.
to bring you to that place. Think about it on this level. Abraham recognized something in that woman, and he said, "You're going to be my sister for this cause." Why? For what cause? To prolong, for
To
protection.
spiritual,
Yeah. So, but everybody saw her because even before Pharaoh saw her, everybody knew there was something radiant about her. They just didn't know what it was, and all they could see was their own pleasure in her. You see, she still hasn't been recognized for who she is. And that's what I'm saying. This may be the time or another opportunity that man is starting to recognize who Sarah is.
But let's look at everything. Even when, and Pharaoh representative of man running his way, deciding whatever. Even when he did that, because of his search, he recognized her. And he recognized who she was and didn't touch her. But the rest of the people around him didn't. So was, and I'm going back to what you said about hiding, right?
Right.
Was the hiding of the Shekinah represented by Pharaoh saying primarily get the hell out and you take the woman with you?
In other words,
Basically,
yeah, this is not a part of my world. I don't know what to do with this.
now I'm not talking about from that perspective. I'm talking about from the perspective, get her out of here, because if I do what I'm planning on doing with this, I'm going to be destroyed.
I'm gonna be
My
destroyed,
whole kingdom
yeah.
is gone.
Yes.
So, hey, look, let me give you some money so you can go.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
That makes sense, because self-preservation hides divinity. When you focus on self,
Yeah.
not losing your possessions, your identity, you hide, you hide.
In the old days,
that's what brought Moses where he was.
Mhm.
That's what brought Moses to the seat of Pharaoh. Okay.
in the old days, a marriage was, whether it's the parents to come together or a boy goes to the father and say, I want your daughter. And the protection was, one, the daughter would not be with him unless one of her parents were there,
Right.
presumably her mom. So they were never alone. But you know what her protection was? He was seen with her. Whenever she go out, he was with her. So everybody knows this is who she's betrothed to. That you see what I mean? So then when that time came, the priest would get with him and have a prayer, and they talk, and then they bring in his parents. Then they bring in his best man in his room. And that party will go to her to see if she's ready. And then he bring her out. You see? So it was all a thing that she was protected the whole time. From the time that the two minds came together, there was a protection there until it was time for this thing to union.
So that's the protective aspect of the woman in the earth, in terms of those of us who feel like regardless of what it takes, we must protect that honor. So now that it is time, that woman is being submitted to in terms of the authority. You see what I'm talking about? Because what happened is that I can see that, because to be honest with you, I've seen throughout history, we have a matriarchal society throughout history. The grandmothers who run the village, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But we reverse that thing, but now we're coming back to it. So we don't have to protect Barbara anymore, because our desire is for her protection.
Yeah.
So you don't have to do it. You see where I'm coming from? It is there. So now, with us not having to do that anymore, because it's there, it frees Barbara to move in any direction necessary without any hesitation, without any restrictions. You know, she can drive a car now. You can smoke a cigarette too if you want to. Yeah. Because we're just going to do that. Yeah. But those kinds of things that were restricted on females only.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
And I guess what I'm saying is, look at the opportunities
Yes.
here. Be consciously aware of what we're doing here, or who we are.
Okay. So when we talk about who we are, right?
The point I think I also hear you saying is that if we are the gateway, then that's what's being set into, that's what's in motion now.
Yeah.
The fewer restrictions on the Shekinah, the women. So one of the things that we can begin to pay attention to is how women are spoken of, how they are related to, how they're dealt with, not only here, not only in the United States, but in countries abroad. And I think we began to see part of that even before this particular gateway opened completely. It was open, it began to open. But now that it is open, it's going to be potential massive
It's a revolution.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You ever been in a situation or you see something and you want to pray about it or you want to do something and you don't know what to do, but you have a strong desire to do what's right? To me, that's where we are. We may not know what to do from it, but we have a desire to do what's right.
And that is the duty.
Yeah.
When you set the desire, you determine what comes back through the gateway. Because the gateway is a mirror for your desire as well.
So you, it's like that thing, you know that thing where they do the time thing and send people to other planets?
Stargate.
Yeah, Stargate thing. That's pretty much, whatever you put in the Stargate determines what comes back.
And
So,
we're going to realize now, what we are realizing now, we are the Stargate.
Yeah.
You see, science is proving we are the Stargate. And I want to throw one thing on there that we talked about last night, because a lot of times and y'all know I always touch on this, we look at the kids and we feel how lost they are. But when we start to understand our desire and that what it's going to bring through, we also can understand they're in the best position ever because they don't have the programming all of us were built with. They
look at the
they
example.
have none of it. Exactly.
Yeah, look at it.
He doesn't have, that's what one thing I always notice about Nick and the rest, they have none of the programming. And though they don't understand nothing about connecting each other, especially males and females, they connect on the most superficial stuff and it burns out like a bright and burning star. They have the best opportunity to receive what we're talking about and it be reestablished.
Yeah.
Even in areas where it may not be reestablished for us if we don't choose to let go of old programming, they do if we have that desire. So they are in the best position to receive in the world. I'm not going to limit it to the youth. The world is in the best position to receive because everything we trusted has fallen apart.
You know what you just shot down almost? Let me see if you got the leg standing under. Our desire is to bring all of these kids together in this school.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm hearing is that we don't have to do that. We can touch them from here. Did I hear you say that?
It's very much possible because this is the thing.
So somebody got to put some stuff on the table so we can distribute it.
But look at this. Number one, kids, honestly, they don't receive in settings. Have y'all noticed that?
Yeah.
We are the last generation that learned how to sit at the desk for 5-6 hours a day. They can't do that, and we mad at them because they can't. That was taught to turn us into zombies.
Well,
And we're the last one that went through the zombie training camps. Now they are not programmed for these zombie training camps, but they receive things more quicker, and that's why the technology developed around them for them to receive more quickly. But what's the thing is, we have the ability to determine what's being sent through these networks that they are absorbing from.
And that's why there is such a battle against Montessori type techniques to teach the kids because they begin to think for themselves.
And allow them to be themselves.
We-
is what
yeah,
we're talking about.
Right. We were talking about setting them up at their own pace.
And that's more.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about. But what I'm hearing is that we're in this other place now. And the time with time not existing as it has in our future, then we need to probably make some decisions about what our desires are in reference to them, as opposed to our desiring to, without saying it, because we didn't say it, but our real desire was to keep them out of jail.
Mm-hmm. Keep them off drugs.
Keep them off drugs, get them a good job, put them out of games, and essentially making them a different kind of zombie.
Yeah. Hold on, and I want to throw one quick comment in there. Look at this. Time has run out, because guess what? The oil is almost gone. People don't know that. The oil has already peaked. The money has no value. They know that. So everything we've been taught was our God. It's done. Oil and money are the if time is God, then money is the Son, and oil is the Holy Spirit, and both of them ran out. So now, three of them. I'm talking about the apostles at the time. The apostles of time are dead. So we cannot recreate something that's going to work in that system, because if oil is through, if money is gone, that means everything we see is soon going to change.
Actually, I believe that based on what you're saying, it's not gonna change. It already has.
That's what I mean, manifest.
We're gonna manifest. And the reason we're sitting here is to make sure that we don't do something that we have said under no circumstances we won't miss it. You know, we were like, no matter what it takes, no matter what we have to give up, no matter what direction we have to travel in, we are not going to miss this opportunity.
Let me tell you what we've actually done too by our desire. Since we have been meeting and been talking about this, what I am witnessing is when we talk about the Sunday in church, the 21st century learner will not be put in a box. We can't. What we're talking about recreating, they will not allow you to recreate it because point in case, what I dealt with all last week, this new 21st century learner, their minds have been awakened to the possibilities that everything that I need to know is outside of these walls, and you're not going to hold me in a box and teach me in the traditional setting, in the traditional way. I have a teacher that refuses to change. The children rebelled last week. They told her we need it different. She would not give it to them differently, so they started, and this is an advanced level group of kids. They started wreaking quiet havoc in her classroom, and then went all around the school saying, y'all need to come in there and see what's going on, because she ain't teaching. As they put it. And we're like, you can't decide how she's teaching. Yes, we can. She's not doing it. Come in there, Ms. Smith, and see. I sat in there for 2 days, and I saw exactly what they saw. And then they looked at me and said, okay, what you gonna do? Did you see it? We didn't act fast enough.
Wow.
They went online and created givemisssoandsohell.com and posted until you get your act together. You can't teach me the way you're teaching me because that's not how I learn. And then they defined what they wanted her to do differently. Because we don't learn with you standing at a board talking to us. We need to have our minds stimulated. We need to have technology. We need to have pure-led instruction, which is what I'd already told her when I observed her. But they didn't know I told her that. So when we put it out there in the macro, our discussion, listen, Marcy got in trouble too.
She made a rebel, not she punched me.
No, I didn't. I just sat back, and then, they were like, "This is cyberbullying. You can't bully other people." She's crying. What did I do wrong?
They got hyperbully. She told the hyperbully.
I don't think we can never be guilty because our desire supersedes just what we're sitting here saying, oh, we can't recreate. They won't allow us to recreate because we have awakened something in them that will not be shut off by our desire. And I didn't know that until we've been wanting it for so long. And then when we saw it, I almost didn't recognize it. I was like, these kids are out of control. But no, they're not. These boys, and when I went back to my principal and said, you're making us read this book on this gap that we now have. And I can't think of the word. It's not generational gap. It's talking about how we are now behind all nations because of the way we teach. And she's making us, in the first chapter, which I had not read the book at that point, outlined everything those children did. So I looked at her Friday and said, well, not Friday, on Thursday, you all punished the children, but they did exactly what's outlined in the book. We are telling them to think another way and to recognize how they are to be taught. They did that. And when we wouldn't listen, they took it to the next level. No, they weren't supposed to give her hell.com, but that's all they knew. And then the wild thing was, even after they were punished and made to take it down, they put it back up the next day. And they say, you think this is going away? So I can't wait to see what's going to be there when I get back Tuesday. Because they are not going to let this go because they are awakened to it's bigger than anything that you all have ever pushed us behind walls of tradition and said, I'm going to just teach you to think like I want you to think. This generation won't do that.
So if you want to know what's up on that site, then close your eyes and breathe. You tell them what to put up now.
But I
We
desire.
are doing this.
Let it be
Because
so.
they're absolutely right. She teaches, she has
All right, look.
a Promethean board in her room and will not use it.
Wow.
She will put something on
Right.
one of those with a smart board beside her. And they're like, what is your, and they ask her, what is your problem?
You know,
They rebelled, and I mean, and they even, we do shout outs on TV. They got in trouble because they went on TV and said, continue the revolution.
Pastor, your generation is reborn.
So you know, we're like, what is going on? But I see it is a spiritual thing because we wanted them to be awakened.
They're awake.
They're awakened.
Yeah. Okay,
oh, I was gonna say part of the reason they're doing that is because they realize that stuff like the new technology increases the rate at which they are able to carry out that revolution.
Their minds process quickly.
And so feel like they have an innate knowing of where they want to be, and if they see a box trying to be put on them that impedes them from being able to get there in any way, then that's
they're gonna tear the box up. And anybody else.
Even if they get in trouble, they will not stop.
But that was that generation thing you talking about. We did. It didn't matter what you do. You can't put all of us in jail unless they're watching.
And we need to embrace that.
Yeah.
Because see, I don't know if we know it or not, we are still conditioned to be very resistant to them showing themselves like that because of the zombie camp we went
Yeah.
through. But we need to embrace that because I already believe all of this is done. All we have worshiped, it's already dead. People who are open to embrace what is manifesting will be ready for it. The rest will be kind of terrified because they will feel like their identity, everything they lived their life for is taken away from them, but it's dead. That time is over. So, like, when we are embracing who we are free now to not have to represent anything in a box. We should walk and feel no pressure about how we need to say something for someone else to feel okay with something that's already dead. We don't need to feel that we need to appear a certain way for things that are already dead. We by embracing ourselves, we are freeing others who are looking for the same thing and fueling those kids.
And you dealt with that yesterday in another way when we talked about the workplace freedom.
Yeah.
You know, instead of, feeding that
Yeah.
and making people feel good about it, the reality of it is you brought that to yourself, now deal with it. Deal with it. So when you deal with it, what you're actually doing is pushing it to other people who don't know how to deal with it. And then they begin to deal with it. So that's, I think with the what we're actually seeing is the Elohim coming out of the womb of beginning. And those kids are reflective of that.
And what I see actually, we talked about fear earlier today. We talked about confidence in who we are. Well, with confidence is just a lack of fear. And with the kids, what they actually do is they recognize and they're actually realizing that they're Elohim. And when we're talking about passing that from one another in the workplace, that happens in two different ways. First of all, when someone sees someone being Elohim and they see them being confident, they recognize that same thing in themselves. The other thing is when you treat them that way and you treat them no matter who they are as Elohim, you also awaken that within themselves the same exact way because you acknowledge that the part is saying basically, and just going back to what Avatar say, I see you, I recognize you.
Yeah.
So that all of a sudden is like, that person, hey, I see you, you there. And it's like, oh, and then the eye just opens up, the third eye.
Well, the other thing I hear is that we were talking about time last night. Well, there is no time now. I mean, from one day to the next, there's revolution.
Yeah.
The thing that used to take years to occur. And now there's going to be revolution. And so we've got to be open to that and ready for that. And for all the people who don't see it coming. You know, we talked about wanting to see things coming. there are gonna be a lot of people who don't see things coming because they're clinging to the past,
But-
clinging to the way things used to be, the order, quote unquote, that they perceived was there.
Like the teacher, she probably afraid, she may be scared of that Prometheus board. She might be
Yeah,
scared.
she intimidated
She
by it.
doesn't
We gotta
wanna
have
change.
compassion for that.
Yeah.
She said she doesn't believe that bells and whistles is how you teach algebra. That you just should do the numbers because that's what kids know, that's how she learned. And we said, but you got these very expensive calculators that the district bought, and everybody's supposed to be using them. Well, some of them don't belong here anyway because they can't do math, okay? If they can't do it by, in their heads like you want them to, give them the calculators. I will do that second semester once they prove to me that they can do math. These kids can do math. They're just open to doing it a lot of different ways, not just your way.
That Clark got in trouble with that. They would put problems on the board, and Clark did not do the steps. She didn't write the answer.
That's me.
And
So I stopped.
when she got in trouble, the teacher was telling her it is impossible for you to get the answer unless you cheat. So she stood over her and gave her problems. She would write the answer. So I asked her, "Are you working them in your head?" She said, "No, I just see the answer." And I'm like, "Okay, so how do you see the answer?" She said, "In my head." I'm like, "Okay." But now what I'm seeing is that her third eye's open.
That's what we've been asking to happen to these
Yeah.
children. Well,
Asking
consciousness
each
in the
other.
land,
Yeah.
actually,
Yeah.
the whole
Yeah.
consciousness, so.
So
Yeah.
that's what's happening. And now, having said that, what you described, what I told you, we said about these kids, right? Now that their third eye is open, we cannot afford to put those things in front of that eye for them to see that will be detrimental or that will lead them to another box. We have to put something in front of that third eye to keep them moving forward and expanding with a serious desire to move forward and expand. The other thing we have to be cautious about, be cognizant of, is that we cannot allow disrespect to be identified as growth. You see, we can't mix those. So
Like disrespect is some form of revolution or something like that.
yeah, what the revolution they're doing is not disrespect at all, what they're doing now. But and even what they're saying about the teacher is not disrespectful, it's trying to get her to listen. You see? But there are, okay, for example, let's say with those students, they come into your office and they refuse to sit down and they refuse to talk one at a time. That's not positive growth. That's disrespect. So we cannot say, well, they're being free. An example of that is this. When we came through the 60s, this guy allowed his kids to talk to him any kind of way. You know, I don't mean yelling, but they use the F word, MF, this in common conversation. And he was saying, but that's their freedom. They need to be able to express themselves. And I'm saying, if one of mine, I ain't having it at that time. When my kids come out their mouth with that, they ain't gonna be able to open their mouth no more. So, I get kids, and his kids begin to grow, he get more kids and his kids. All his kids end up in jail.
Too much freedom.
So, it's not actually freedom, what he actually did was put them in bondage. They put them in bondage to themselves, as opposed to teaching them a pathway that would lead them to a place of expansion.
He poisoned them with mercy.
Yeah. Too much mercy. It's the word for corrupt in the Aramaic is poison. It is not. So when we say he corrupted them, he actually, you're right, he poisoned them. So we have to be careful not to give them poison, because this can be poison if you drink too much of it, if you drown. You know, so anything can be poison if you don't use it, if you don't balance the usage of it.
That's funny you would say that. While we were getting dressed this morning, we were looking at own channel, and Dr. Fields was on, and it just come on when we were leaving. But they had a family on there. There's a new, which I had not heard of this. There's a new movement of parents that are not. They're calling it non-school instead of homeschool. They keep their children out of school. They say they don't go to any school because they want them to define how they want to learn. So they don't go to school. They can watch all the TV they want, but when you remove restrictions, they say, guess what? They don't want to watch TV all day long, and they can eat whatever they want. We are giving them the right to express their individuality. And Dr. Phil was like, but you know, when I was in 7th grade, I never would have wanted to go to school. And you shouldn't have to school. And they were saying, school puts you in the box and makes you think the way it wants you to think. So we decided to take everything away. When we want them to learn about history, we go to the museum. Or when we want them to do math, we give them our money and say, now you go to the grocery store, you buy, and these are little children. You go pay for whatever it is that you're getting, but we never make them go to school. We never make them do anything. And then I had to leave, so I don't know what the audience said to that. I can only imagine.
I'll show you how dangerous the box is. And I want you to think about this. And some of you don't say nothing, you'll recognize what I'm going to ask. Who discovered America? You see what I'm saying? The first, who came to your mind? Who came to your, come on, right? No. Back up. He invaded America. Huh? Oh, okay. He invaded. You see what I'm talking about? So when you put them in that box, then you tell them what you want them to know. And what do? They regurgitate. So they have gotten to a place where they're tired of it. And the people, the parents that she's talking about, they are, some people are so rude, you know that? Hey. The parents that she's talking about are fed up with them being in a box, and they are searching for direction. You know, they're searching for something. And if we can put it in the macro, they'll pick it up. Not your phone.
They just searching for anything better.
Yes.
But I remember when I was a kid, I can't remember if I was 11 or 12 years old, but I was kind of a terror at that age. But I remember something I did.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I remember something I did.
1 second. There are other people coming in, and those of you who are accustomed to being here, if you move and slide down some, let them, give them space to sit so they don't have to move across you. Not you, Denise, you gotta stay where you are. Okay?
But what I was saying is I had done something or another that I expected to get the broom thrown at that house that time. But I remember my mom said to me, she said, you know what? I give up. I give up on you. She said, I've tried everything. You just want to be who you are. I give up. You can do whatever you want to do.
You crazy.
You know? But that was the best thing she could have done to me. That beat me up more than anything.
I'm washing my hands of it, boy.
For her to say that. And the point I'm trying to make is, we think we want to be free. We think we don't want boundaries, but we do. We want somebody, and you have to have a balance there. And who knows what that is? I guess from each character, each child.
Here's who knows. The higher self in us
Yeah.
knows. You see, that's what knows how to gauge.
And that's why you treat each child differently.
Exactly.
You have
Yes.
to know that.
Yes.
But for her to say that, it shocked me and it showed me something about myself. And I still remember that to this day, how bad that bothered me for her to say that. You know, because I knew I deserved some kind of punishment for what I did, and I got nothing.
But the Lord self is challenging the parent to be who they're supposed to be, who they have designed themselves to be before entering the womb. And when that parent says, I'm done, and the child desires that discipline, is because they've reached a point where that child has to live with, or deal with rather, what he has put in his life in order for him to travel that, to continue that journey. You see what I'm talking about? So all this thing works, nothing is haphazard or nothing is coincidental, is what I'm saying. Because what I really, really want us to do eventually, hopefully today anyway, is to walk through those 2 chapters in Genesis, just so we can see how the DNA was cultivated.
You want us to do 2 chapters?
No, we're not gonna do 2 chapters. No, we can't get through 2 verses. I'm talking about the overview. Now, 2 chapters, well, we might be here a year. Yeah. That might be all right, huh? Until you get a bill. Hey, he look super joy over there. But the reason I want to do it is not the whole chapter, but there are portions of it that lays the foundation for how we were created. And I think that we have to change our approach, to change our thinking when we talk about creation. Because when we talk about creation, regardless of how much flows from our mouths, the picture in our minds is physical. You see? So in order for us to, at the very least, minimize the picture in our mind that is physical to the point where the creation becomes the reality that it is, we need to do that. You see what I'm talking about? Because when we do that, not only are we embracing who we are, not only are we expanding who we are, but we are also transcending the time element and beginning to see the greater good that we're in the earth to bring about. Okay? All right. We're going to break now. There are no questions or comments on the last statements. If there are, we're going to break.